Hi, I'm Effie and this is What Effie Reads. Today I'm going to be doing the cancel culture tag, which is an original tag that was created by Gunpowder Fiction and Plot. I will of course link their channel down below. I think this is a really interesting tag and it touches on a lot of things that I've been having thoughts about for a while. So I'm kind of really interested to go through the questions and discuss my thoughts on cancel culture and just generally use them as a base to kind of have this conversation. People that have watched a few of my videos may know that I tend to fall pretty heavily on being unable to separate creator from creation, and if a creator is problematic, I'm not really interested in their work. I don't know, these questions probably will help me delve into that a bit deeper, but kind of like a TLDR or TLDW? I'm not sure. Anyway, the first question is tag some people, and obviously I'm still a newbie creator, so I'm a bit about tagging people, but you know, I'd love to see different people's views. She should never see it, but I'd love to see Murphy Napier's opinions on this, especially because she's such good friends with Daniel Green, who obviously there was all that. I don't want to underplay it, but also I don't know enough about the situation, so I'm just gonna say hoo-ha, because I don't know enough to say if it was drama or if it was actually serious stuff. But with Daniel Green last year, I'm sorry, I will get into the questions, I promise. Oh yeah, I'm already in the questions. And obviously I will tag my best friend Shannon, because it's a conversation we often have, and I feel like her opinions are possibly less extreme than mine. I'm not sure, but I think it'd be interesting to see her take compared to mine. The second question is, what is call out / cancel culture? And this is something that I genuinely struggle with. I kind of understand what cancel culture is, but at the same time it's really difficult to understand what cancel culture really is, because the whole concept of getting cancelled, it feels like if you are rich, white, powerful, you're not going to get cancelled. You're still going to be successful, popular, making money, no matter how heinous a human being you are. However, if you are not, then people will potentially use it as an excuse to turn away from you. So I don't know, I think what cancel culture is, according to people that believe that cancelling actually works against the people that it should work against, is taking someone's actions and stopping them from benefiting, cutting them off from their privilege. It's such a difficult one. For me, I struggle to see cancel culture as it's built up, and see it more as holding people accountable. But I also think like people should have the room to grow and go, oh yeah, maybe that wasn't right. Like I know myself, I've made mistakes in the past. I know that the person I was 5 years ago is completely different from the person I am today. So I think in some ways cancel culture is taking the person you were and not accounting for growth and not allowing room for growth. But I also think that if cancel culture is to work correctly, then there should be an opening for a discourse. So if someone did something 5 years ago, they get called out about it, then they should be able to go, oh yeah, I know I made a mistake. Like, I am genuinely sorry for that. And this is what I have done to make amends. This is what I've done to change. This is where I stand now. I don't know. It's very, very difficult to see like people that should be cancelled continue to succeed. Question 3 is cancel / call out culture a positive or negative force in the booktube, bookstagram, bookish community as a whole? Why do you think this is? So I think accountability is so important. It's, like I say, it's really difficult because I struggle to see what cancel culture is. Like, a lot of the time I see more of a, like, not an issue with cancel culture itself, but with people like having an issue with cancel culture. Like, I'm sure that people who are on Bookstagram or people that on, well, Book Twitter or even Booktube, because like the drama overlaps a lot, will have seen that recently there was that post, I can't even remember who put it up, but there was that post where this person was like, oh, we're living in Fahrenheit 451, we're burning books, and it was a list of like all white authors, and it's like, well, these people rightly should be critiqued. I will say there was a couple of authors on the list that I wasn't sure why they were on the list, or yeah, because it had a list of like certain authors and it was being very dismissive about genuine things that they should be held accountable for. And then at the bottom it had like a paragraph of like other authors. I like the way that people are being held accountable, because I don't want to read a book by a TERF. I don't want to read a book by a racist. Like, in fact, this very month, I fell into a bit of an issue where on my TBR, I put on a book that I thought was an inclusive feminist book. And I just specifically chosen that book because I knew that like a similar toned book existed by TERF, and I just wasn't like, I'm not interested in reading books by TERFs. Yeah, there's so many books in the world, I'm not going to waste my time. So I'd put this book on my TBR because I was like, great, a feminist book that I presume is going to be inclusive. I hadn't heard anything bad. And then I had a really bad feeling as I was reading the book, and I get to the end and I go, this doesn't quite sit right. I look it up and the author's a TERF, and I'm going, this is why we need authors to get called out. And the thing is, like, the book's about a data bias. So in some ways you're going, okay, so if you only have data on cis men, then of course you're not going to have data on people who aren't cis men. But to not even acknowledge that, to not even put out a statement and go, I've been lazy with this book. I acknowledge that there's not a binary of you're either a cis man or you're a cis woman. There's people who are intersex, there's people that don't fit the binary. And it's that kind of thing, like, I feel so cheated that I wasted my time on that book, because unfortunately, as I said, I'd gotten to the end of the book and then I discovered they were TERF, and now I'm going, well, that was a waste of my time. I could have read something different. So I think there's pros and cons of it, and I think a lot of the cons are more to do with people creating drama out of this concept they've built up in their head. Like, there's authors that I will not support that people continue to support with quite a lot of happiness. In fact, I can see right behind me there's an author that I'm very much on the fence about. But, this is kind of why we need call out culture, because this author, I still don't know what to feel about them, because they manage their public persona quite well. But then again, before social media was such a thing, you didn't know all this horrible stuff people did, or at least it was much harder to see all the horrible things people did. So yeah, I think the negative is like people creating drama out of it. I think there's also, now this isn't something I can speak with very much information on, but it is something that I've heard is an issue, and that's that if a cis white person is called out, it has very little impact on them. But if a queer author or a trans author or non-binary author is called out, it has much more of an impact on them. Editing Effie here. I think possibly a good example of what I was trying to say here is the situation around Kevin Van Wy and Date Me Bryson Keller. Like, you had this author that was being accused of plagiarism before his book even came out. This is a queer black author. And I've read both Date Me Bryson Keller and 7 Days, Monday to Sunday, which is the book that everyone was saying he'd plagiarised, despite acknowledging the very clear inspiration. And then you have the situation around books like American Dirt, where, as far as I'm aware, the author is white. I apologise if the author is not in fact white, but American Dirt went on to do incredibly well, despite all the massive criticisms around that book. So I think that's an example of where someone who is cis and is white, or at least appears to be white, doesn't really suffer ill effects. However, someone who is black and queer does suffer ill effects. I don't know what I was trying to say beyond that. Like, I'm not knowledgeable enough to know how it does affect queer, trans, like, people that don't have the same level of privilege. However, I have heard, and I'm going to listen because people say that's an issue. But from my perspective, all I'm seeing is these highly privileged authors that are continuously getting people shouting about them, despite the fact that they are horrendous human beings. Question 4 is, from mixing fabrics to involuntary cannibalism, what transgressions do you boycott? boycott an author over. People that undermine other people's rights as a human. So if you're racist, if you are transphobic, if you're homophobic, I don't know, apparently my words are not coming out today, but the big ones for me are those three. But then you also have situations of like bad actions as a human. So things like there's people who I've heard are like have sexually assaulted people. Yeah, I think it's very difficult because like people need to have room to grow. So I think as terrible as it is, I'm more inclined to overlook content in a book, especially content that is potentially coming from a place of naivety, because that is less of a solid thing. But if you are undermining like my rights to exist, my rights to be who I am, then I'm not gonna like you. And I also think that authorial response plays into it as well. Like there's one particular author who I read a horrendous book from them. I hated it so much. It was really bad, really transphobic. And then like looking into it, their response was to double down. And you're going, why don't you just put your hands up and say you did a bad thing? You know, instead of trying to double down when you know what you did was wrong. And then question 5. What does boycott mean to you? Not buy, not read, not promote, all three. How do you boycott? Does this depend on the transgression / offence? So there are so many books in the world I do not have time for. Well, I don't have time for all the books that are on my shelves as it is. Well, I say that. I am not gonna give any time to a book that I'm just not, interested in reading from that particular author. I could quite easily spend my time reading an author who isn't an issue. I suppose the thing is as well that like there's a nuance missed with cancel culture in that cancel culture doesn't have to be permanent, or like cancelling someone doesn't have to be permanent. So I'm someone who likes to give people the benefit of the doubt. So me choosing not to purchase someone's book today at age 29 doesn't mean that 30 years in the future, if they make amends, realise that they are an absolute jerk, that I'm not then going to purchase a book from them. But, I have got finite time to read, I've got finite money, I've got, I make a finite number of posts to Bookstagram and videos for YouTube. So I'm not going to waste my time on authors that I'm not interested in. But I would say there's kind of an extra step in that, like, I don't generally go out of my way to talk about authors that I, don't care for. But with the likes of that book that I read, the Turfy one, I am probably in my wrap up for July going to include a portion where I go, this book's transphobic, probably not the best book to read. And like, I've got a video where I read Bridge of Souls, and as a whole I'm a fan of V. Schwab's work, but I have a very particular issue with Bridge of Souls, which I address in a video where like the video is wholly dedicated to me reading Bridge of Souls, and in that video I address the issue, and at the same time obviously I am talking about another author that relates to that issue. I'm not even sure what the point I was going for. I think what I'm saying is that sometimes I will go that extra step further and go, hey guys, you know this author? Just a little heads up, they're not great. But I'm probably not going to dedicate too much time to doing that. Although I do have plans for a certain video to come out in September, because there's a certain popular book coming out in September. But I guess we'll see. Question 6. What books or authors, if any, that you would have otherwise read, do you boycott? Oh, now this is an interesting one. The only one that springs to mind is, I talked about them earlier, but like without naming them, but John Boyne. So sorry, my nose is so itchy. Right. Yeah, so I talked about them earlier without naming them, but 100% John Boyne. I have heard really good things about some of his later works, or well, I'm not sure if these are later, but I've heard some really good things about some of his books. But after reading his transphobic book and reading about the way that he responded to people's very valid issues with his transphobic book, I'm no longer interested in reading anything from John Boyne. I think another one that springs to mind is Stephen Fry, and it's one that actually like pulls at my heart a little bit, because I did enjoy Stephen Fry's comedy, but now the way that he continues to defend Rowling, it just sits really, really poorly with me. Like, it's one thing that he's the UK narrator for those books, and I think there's a line I could go where I'm like, well, I'm not interested in reading those books, obviously, but like the narrator, I don't know how much say narrators have in it, and there's a potential that when those books were narrated, like things weren't as known. I don't know. But recently Fry made a comment that was essentially, Rowling's still my friend. I still stand by her. And now this is the line that really got me. I'm sorry if you're offended, or I'm sorry if you're hurt. Like something along those lines of the classic non-apology, where it's like, I'm sorry you feel that way, rather than like, I'm sorry for that this is a thing that has been done. Just makes me so angry. But I think in general, authors I'm not really like, I tend to switch off. Like as soon as I know they're not a great person, I'm not really interested anymore. And I will always ask for people to tell me if, in fact, I think I'm getting ahead of myself, to be honest. Right, so question 7. When does boycotting a book or author become cancel culture? Are the two even related? I mean, this is where it becomes really difficult, because I struggle to see, like, I really struggle with the concept of what cancel culture is, because from my perspective, I don't see the realistic fallout from people being cancelled. People continue to have a platform, continue to be able to spew their vitriol. I mean, I think possibly it's the line from boycott to cancel culture is when you start getting vocal. So not purchasing, not reading, not talking about are very much passive, quiet, inward gestures. But when you start talking about those authors and shouting about what's wrong with them, you get into what probably is considered cancel culture. And yeah. Okay, so question 8 is, how do you think power, money, size of audience, influence, etc. affect who is cancelling and being cancelled? E.g., can a small booktuber cancel a best-selling author? What about a large booktuber and a tiny author? I think this is where the line between, like, what is a boycott and what is cancel culture becomes very clear, because if you're doing all these quiet things, it doesn't matter like how big your platform is. Like, people don't know about the things you do quietly, but the moment you start talking about them, you start having an influence. And you know, I've got what, 20 subscribers, but like anything could make you go viral. Like, I've got no desire to go viral, don't get me wrong, but if I don't know, like if I turned around today and said, author X is this bad person, they've done these bad things, here's these receipts, and that video went viral, it doesn't matter that I only have 20 subscribers. If it goes viral and millions of people see it, millions of people talk about it, the fact that I am basically smaller than a dot could still have that larger impact. But I definitely think that the ability for someone with a larger platform to affect people is so much greater in general, because so I've got my 20 subscribers. I am lucky if I get a handful of views on each video, which is absolutely fine. But it means that no matter what nonsense I might spew, or even if it is valid what I'm saying, like, I've only got a handful of people seeing it. If I had a platform of like 100,000 subscribers and my videos were regularly seen by even like 1,000 people, because then you've got exponential growth. But I also think there is a very valid point about the person that's being cancelled, because privilege creates such a massive cushion. Like, you know, like, people are still talking about Rowling, about, where are my words today? People still talk about Rowling. People still talk about John Boyne. People still worship the ground Adichie walks on, because they have that cushion. Whereas if you've got a smaller debut author, or you've got an author that is queer, or, you know, it's a person of colour, or anything like that, it doesn't take much for people to go, oh well, knew they wouldn't be very good. Like, people's inherent biases, like, it's so hard for like an unknown author to become your new favorite anyway. So people are like, oh well, I knew I wouldn't like it anyway, and not even bother. And I think as far as like authors go as well, like a debut versus an author with a large back catalogue, like it's so much more difficult to cancel an author that the fans are already invested in. Whereas obviously a debut, you don't have that level of investment. So I think that plays into it as well. And question 9 is, do you apply the same standards to booktubers you watch? Have you ever called out, confronted, privately messaged, or unsubscribed from somebody over their opinion? I mean, I just don't have enough time to watch as it is. I barely watch the people I like without people having a differing opinion to me. Like, I think there's a difference between having a discourse and just being on the opposite side of things to someone. And I think BookTube specifically is not a great example because I'm rubbish at remembering to click that subscribe button, at remembering to click like, etc. And oftentimes I can be enjoying a video and will still end up navigating away from it for any number of reasons. However, with the likes of BookTube, for example, with the likes of Bookstagram, for example, I will unfollow people or hide them or whatever you can do to like get them off your feed if I see them being not great. Like, if someone's repeatedly talking about the Harry Potter franchise, to me that feels like a signal that you don't care. If you're posting an aesthetically pleasing photo of a book, I'm going to think you're thinking positive. But I think that's probably also a bad example. Like, the thing that gets me more on Bookstagram is people that spew anti-vax stuff. Like, it's so important that people feel comfortable and, actually get the vaccine without people, spewing all kinds of conspiracy theories. And I recently did like unfollow someone like immediately because they posted something about shedding, and I was like, what nonsense is this, and why are you telling on yourself like that? Now, don't get me wrong, if you have got genuine reasons that you cannot get the vaccine, that's perfectly fine, but spewing pseudoscience and then also being like, none of us are vaccinated, just makes me think you're a plague rat. Which, maybe I'll get cancelled for saying that, but quite frankly, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Don't spew pseudoscience. Don't give anti-vaxxers fuel. Simple as. And before I go into a whole rant about that, we get on to the last question. If cancel culture is a destructive force, a constructive force might be to highlight talented authors and excellent books from communities victimized by anybody you boycott. Please highlight some authors and recommend us some books. Okay, so this is a really tricky one for me, but I will try. I think the first person that came to mind when I originally heard this question was Charlotte Amelia Poe. They are an autistic, non-binary, asexual bisexual author. So lots of queer identities there. And their book, How to Be Autistic, got me so deep in here. It's only about 160 pages long, but I had to repeatedly put it down and just reflect because it was so impactful to read. And I highly recommend it, but as I say, it is not an easy book to read. Another author that I would recommend is Aidan Thomas. So far I've only read Lost in the Neverwoods by them, but it is a really interesting Peter Pan retelling that I really enjoyed. And yeah, who else? Mark Oshiro. They write absolutely beautiful work. Each of Us a Desert is a sapphic fantasy with a very Latinx feel to it, and it just is so beautiful and powerful. Who else? You know, I probably read loads of The Deep by Rivers Solomon. That is a powerful novella. It has such a rich history, but essentially the concept is that okay, so trigger warning for violence against Black people and slavery, but it is the idea is that when Black people who were enslaved on the slave ships, the pregnant women were thrown overboard to drown, and from their bodies they birthed these babies who were in fact almost like black mermaids, but it's a little bit more complex than that. Like, they're not straight up mermaids, they are developed to fully live underwater. And it's just such a powerful book and has a real feeling of community. And then at the end of the book, it delves into the history of how this story came to be. And I just found it so captivating and interesting. And yeah, thoroughly recommend. And just in general, I'm drawing a real blank on things. So what I will do is I will put more recommendations in the description down below if I think of any. And I would love to know other people's thoughts on this. So even if I haven't tagged you, please let me know if you do this tag. And thank you to Scott and Nell for creating this tag, because this has been a lot of fun. And I genuinely didn't think that I would have enough to speak about to make this a video. And I'm looking, and I've been recording for 44 minutes. So if you got this far, thank you very much, because I think this is going to be a really long video. And until next time, bye!